Start the Q&A session. I'd just like to say to Catherine and Eliza, what a great initiative. And it's actually mentioned in the government cyber security strategy to have more women, ladies, in the cyber security domain. We need you badly, and the percentage is not good enough. So I think it behoves upon all of us in this audience to spread the word and do our best to bring and introduce more ladies into this exciting, exciting domain.
Thanks, John.
That said, it's now question time. Do we have Anonymous online?
They're not going to say because they're
The
Media?
tweet wall will be up in a second.
Okay. Give me a wave when they're online. So we'll start off with questions to the four speakers here. Anything you want to ask, fire away. If you put your hand up, the ladies with microphones, if you can give your name and then your question, and your name, organisation and question.
There's someone behind you, look. Look behind you.
Speak loud and clear.
Hi, to the ladies that just spoke then. It's not easy to get down to London from those that are further up north.
Yep.
Is there any way of contacting you or attending the sessions remotely? Do you video them? Do you blog them? Can we Skype?
So I think there's two. Oh, there we go. So I think there's two. Oh, sorry, do you mind if I jump?
Go for
So
it.
there's two levels to that, which is one, we are looking to create chapters. So we have done Ladies of Norwich and we're doing Ladies of Bristol next. So I do think we are looking to expand our chapter program because the in-person part of the community is really important. But that being said, one of the things that sponsorship is funding right now is the building of a digital platform where we can start offering virtual services as well. So we don't have the resources to do that yet, but I would love to see that part of the program because London, despite all outward appearances, is not the center of the universe.
No, and we've got interest in Manchester and Bristol, haven't we? Chapters starting up there. So if there's a place in particular that you're interested in, we want to kind of use the OWASP model and go down that route where if you've got genuine interest and you just put it forward to us, if we meet you and we like you, you can start your own chapter.
So are your sessions weekdays or weekends then?
So the London one is the last Thursday of every month. And it just kind of goes with whatever works in your area. So Norwich, for instance, is Wednesday, isn't it? Or is it the second Thursday? I don't know. Second Thursday of every month. I should know. I found it.
We're flexible.
Thing. No, I don't.
Thank you.
Next question. On the...
Hello. Hello. Ian Davis, BTG. Just wondering what the ladies would say to two 18-year-old daughters to get them interested, because they're not going to take any advice from their father. So.
Bring them along.
Well, don't you know, first you have to set security controls around their access to Wi-Fi and tell them if they want it, they've got to hack their way into it. So, it's incentive-based modeling. I think that part of it, for us, one of the things that we really thought was interesting, we thought of it as like, oh my God, we have an organization, let's brand it and let's figure out what to do. We got inspiration from the suffragette movement, which had the anniversary last year, but then we also got inspiration from, Eliza pulled all these retro pictures of women coding in the 60s and 70s, and they were like boxes. And we were like, this is awesome. It's like cool women at computers. And I think part of that's it is like bringing back the coolness and making it, being able to shine a light on some women in the industry that are making it awesome again, or also showing it's like it wasn't always this way.
And if they're 18, just bring them along.
Yeah.
Just be like, free drinks and food all night. And then you get to hack shit. Like, no, just bring them along and we'll sort of put them on the right road. And it's gold rush season. Why shouldn't women be a part of that? Come on.
Just say as well, there's I hate to sort of flag another publication I haven't worked for, but Wired have a couple of really good articles. If you look at the Wired one about hacking Silk Road, take down a Silk Road, and you can read. They're really fun, like slightly long reads, but they kind of get you into that. So that there might be a sort of soft sell of that. Ooh, you're sort of reading this, and off the back of it, they might be stirred. I don't know.
I think
just
it's like if your dad gives you something to read, though, you're just like, no, I'm not reading that.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Maybe print it out.
Yeah. Leave it.
Do not read this. And post it, and then they're like, I'm going to read it. Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, one for you from me. Do you think the government's doing enough in promoting cybersecurity and putting enough money in it from your perspective?
Money, I don't know. What I will say is I think the shift from GCHQ through to the National Cybersecurity Centre has been a very successful one for them. Partly, and I'll just be honest about this, I think the people who run media for the National Cybersecurity Centre understand how media works way more than GCHQ guys ever did. And have also managed to create a sort of brand separation of, well, we are no longer that, we are now this. But it's not just about the brand. They have also been doing loads of good outreach stuff with industry, and they do seem to be, they're far more open to talking to the media. They're more on the front foot. So I think that's, you know, from a PR media perspective. Money, whenever, I just remember going through a period when they would announce again and again and again how much money they were putting in. It was just the same amount of money, which is a classic government trick, isn't it? Oh, we've got, you know, 60 million to give to cyber, which we've been doing for the last 4 years. Well, how much of the 60 million is actually left? So that I don't know whether the money's there, but I do think from a PR point of view it's got better, I think.
Talking about the government, do you think there's an element of fatigue coming in with end users with the legislative efforts they're putting in to increase security? So if I look, for example, recent changes that are required as part of GDPR for me to click to give consent for cookies, you find yourself just going, yeah, click, 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 yes, 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 yes. Not really fully understanding what you're actually saying yes to and actually undermining the security that's meant to come from giving that consent.
But that raises a really important question, actually, not just in the industry, but sort of worldwide. How much responsibility do we take as individuals? You know, like if you were to leave your car unlocked on the street, depending on the street, you take in a certain degree of risk, and you have to analyse that in your head, and whether or not you're willing to do that. And I think we have to sort of become more mature in our thought process when it comes to living in a cybersecurity-enabled world. Because it's something that's not tangible, we can't hold it and we can't see it, you know, we tend to think that it's not real, and whatever happens on the internet is not real. And that kind of raises so many questions. And I think that, you know, so many people that aren't in our industry will just click through, like, yeah, okay, it's cookies, whatever. And they don't understand the concept of a cookie. They don't understand that they're allowing something into their space, regardless of how small that is.
So and my question is, whose responsibility is that? Because I don't think anyone between public or private has stepped up to the plate enough, and I don't say that only because I run a security awareness company. But the level of awareness for basic, like not even just GDPR data privacy, but you know, if you look at statistics across the world of, you know, what is secure versus not secure, it's the level of either misinformation or lack of information is kind of shocking. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think a lot of it is to do with risk appetite as well. I mean, there are certain risks that we can probably do with not pestering everybody, particularly people who aren't in this industry, aren't too familiar with kind of InfoSec policies whenever they go to work. They're not going to care about them at home either. And I think if we continue to give them something else to click through, they're not going to stop and go, okay, I'll read this as well. They weren't reading the first 2 or 3 things. The fourth and fifth they're not going to read. The problem, I think, will come whenever there is something that comes along that we really do need them to pay attention to. And it's going to be really difficult for us to go, hey, this one you definitely need to read.
Yeah, it's like the boy who cried wolf, isn't it?
100%.
It's actually, I mean, I've got bad news. It's way, way worse than this. Sorry, but I chaired an Information Commissioner's Office conference the other day that was all about this particular issue. I do think there is this issue of grooming people to just click OK, and you know that just lowers everybody's defences. The issue you've got is what's happened is a piece of legislation has dropped into a viper's nest of an industry. Yes. The websites that you visit and that you go to, the publishers, have almost no power and almost no choice about this. They are on their knees trying to get ad revenue and get money in through the door. And the way they do it is they take dollars from whatever marketing company comes their way and says, can you run our script on your site? Can you put this on our site? And those marketing companies are the ones who design the pop-ups and say, you use this pop-up or no money for you. And the website goes, all right, so they stick the pop-up on, they click OK here to the consent. And it's entirely driven by the advertising technology companies behind this, who are basically taking these websites, the publishers, for a ride. It's way worse than just, should we click on this thing or not? It's an entire industry that is being manipulated into putting these pop-ups in front of people. So there's you, the user, there's the website, but the problem is actually further back. The problem is the industry that's sort of driving those pop-ups to happen. So
I've been working on this for the last 2 years, and actually it's even more incestuous than that. It's actually been led by some of the biggest tech giants in America. They do not want to comply because of the amount of millions they've made off it. And so the current thing that's been happening since GDPR went law is that they're constantly sending up privacy changes about every 2-3 weeks to push you to click consent. Because you get so fed up of basically getting these, oh yeah, we've just changed our privacy policy again, we've changed it again, we've changed it again. And you're going to get so fed up, you're just going to say consent. Secondly, a lot of, I would say now about 60 to 80% of most websites are non-compliant. When you have the tick boxes, they should be unticked.
this is true. This is absolutely true.
Most of the time, they're ticked. And in the case of Yahoo, they're now saying if you do not consent, you can't use their service.
They weren't good anyways.
No one likes them anyway.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Unfortunately, I've got legacy accounts on there.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
They're
sorry.
great.
I've had there before they got taken over 2-3 times before.
I know.
Yeah.
And that contains sensitive data, personal data.
Well, it's like with anything, as a consumer of any service or any product, you have more power than you realise you have. So if you don't spend money on things, and enough of us don't spend money on things, and a product doesn't sell, we've utilised our joint power as a group of people to take something out of the market. Now, if enough people go, okay, I realise what they're trying to do here, I'm not going to use Yahoo, I'm going to use something else, then they've lost you, and that's their loss. And eventually, when more and more people do it, they'll have to change their game. And if they don't, they don't. And we just have to educate more people until more and more people say, I'm not standing for this. We have the right to say no, and we have to utilise that right. We can't just be so lazy that we just go, oh, well, I either have to give up my data or I can't use Yahoo. Like, don't use Yahoo. Sorry to be brutal.
I know what you mean. I just have to disagree. The companies that we're talking about, their technologies across loads and loads and loads of different websites. So I'll take what you mean. I can go, okay, I'm not going to use Yahoo. I'm going to use these guys over here. The ad tech companies are like, yeah, we're on there as well. And what's interesting for me is there's 2 legal actions going on about this at the moment, and both those legal actions are based around security of data. Because what they're saying is these ad tech companies that want all of the sites are accumulating loads and loads and loads of personal data. Well, how secure is that? And I think we're going to see the day one of these ad tech companies gets popped, and suddenly they found out that they had all of your medical diagnoses and they knew what you shopped for, and all these, your porn habits was all gathered in that one company that then got popped. But I'd love to believe consumer power can sort it, but I'm not sure whether if you just go...
No, I don't think it can, and I agree with you on that, but that's all we've got at the moment. And if that's all we've got to use it. And I do think that, the best way to show your lack of power is by telling people that you don't have power. And I think if we just say, oh, well, there's too much to deal with, that's giving too much power away. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
I know there's not much we can do legally, but we can refuse, if we know that something's wrong, we can refuse to use that service.
Yes, but you'd have to do it across all the different services. So your objection isn't to Yahoo. And if you inflict the pain on Yahoo, you're not inflicting pain where it needs to be. You've somehow got to hop beyond that and say, well, I'm depriving my data of not just all the publishers on, but the layer behind it, as it were. I don't know quite how you do that.
How would you do that then?
Well, first we need to expose the industry and know who they are. And secondly, we need to find out what data they're sitting on. And thirdly, we need to find out how we can control that data. But I thought that was all what GDPR was meant to do. So, isn't that GDPR?
Interesting.
Sorry.
Question at the back there. Thank you.
Anonymous are waiting online for you. Somebody to answer the question. Anonymous are waiting online. For a question.
They're in. They're on.
Oh, they're on.
Whilst we're just waiting for this question, Anonymous are online, taking tweets and answering questions. So if you'd like to pose them to them at this point, they're ready for you.
Dun, dun, dun.
a question here.
Hello. Yeah. What are your opinions on the reverse mergers proposed in America for large kind of social media platforms in terms of kind of cyber aspects? Because, like, by definition, a social media is a group of people collecting together to connect. So, by nature, it might kind of hold a monopoly. What would you kind of advise with companies like that? Because obviously they're buying out like Instagram and kind of making it a unified platform. It might obviously open the consumer up to kind of, I don't know, vulnerabilities and stuff. But what would you kind of say?
Sorry, what was the question?
Yes. I think it's a very good question. It casts your mind back to things like the AT&T antitrust legislation of a couple of decades ago. I think it's going to be a while before anything happens there. I think the world has become so much more connected, it's going to be difficult to see how that's going to be enforced. So I think there may be a lot of sentiment expressing what I think underlies your question, but I think for interest, possession, data, customer data, as we saw in one of the presentations earlier today, that's where the real value lies. I think it'll be resisted and lobbied and fought against. So I'd be surprised to see it happening quickly, but that may well change.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of one social media platform becoming several, because I may only be a part of one of those social media platforms, but all of a sudden those 2, 3, 4, as that continues, I'm feeding into that same database anyway. But I think what's interesting is there's also a bit of a turning point in terms of Mr. Zuckerberg coming out and saying that the future of Facebook chat's private. And I'm interested to see what further pressure happens as a result of that. But because there's a long way to go. I mean, encrypting my messages on one platform. I mean, I ironically use his other platform, WhatsApp, where those are encrypted anyway. So I've got messages that are currently going through WhatsApp that are encrypted, ones through Facebook Messenger that are not encrypted, and it's, yeah, I don't like it. There's a lot of work to be done there, and I don't think that he's taking enough steps just yet as his monopoly grows.
Okay, keep the conversation going. Ladies, Catherine, Eliza, what drew you into cybersecurity? Was it money? Was it awareness that cyber was a growth industry and there could be greater opportunities? Was it sheer curiosity?
So for me, I sort of stumbled into it by accident. I was originally doing forensic science at university, and I was absolutely crap at the chemistry side of it. And I literally Googled what can I do in forensics that's not forensic science, and it came up with digital forensics. So I just thought, yeah, okay, I'll give that a go, and I absolutely loved it. I did my first internship at Zone Fox actually. Yeah, and then it just sort of went from there, and the more you learn about it and the more you get hands-on doing it and realise not only how interesting it is, but how integral to our lives it is in terms of critical national infrastructure and how we're only just managing to sustain the lives that we have, and we're all blissfully going around and having a nice day at a conference and whatnot. And meanwhile, you know, there's God knows how many people trying to blow up our oil rigs to wipe us out. So there's, you know, and coming from a military family as well, the whole safety aspect of it sort of really resonated with me. What about you?
So I've spent about 20 years in IT, more the strategy process side proper, but what brought me into creating a startup within the cybersecurity space was sort of what I saw as a gap in the market in terms of being able to communicate in a way that didn't involve fear, uncertainty, or doubt at every corner. And so what we're focusing is on the human behavioral and I'd say the organizational cultural aspects of cybersecurity awareness. So it was a how do I get to the users, how do I get to the employees, and how do I change their hearts and minds around cybersecurity so that they can act as a better protector of themselves, of their teams, and of the organization at large by using different psychological and influence techniques. So I was trying to address what I saw as if we keep on saying don't And if we keep on using the hacker in the hoodie with the green zeros and ones behind their head, it's like the same. Shutterstock must have made a mint on that photo, I tell you. But just trying to find a different way through it, because I see, you know, I agree with Eliza on the urgency, and the more that I learned about it being in this space, the more that I don't sleep at night. And so that's only driven me farther to help find a way to some of these really challenging problems, like the human element that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Excellent. Is that the general view of ladies in the audience? Would anybody have another view? Okay. Question.
Well, I'm not a lady, but I've got a question. I came to this conference with a very specific mission. So I work in low carbon technologies, which are going to transform markets. So mobility as a service, we'll use autonomous vehicles. You can hack autonomous vehicles. Smart cities, if you use smart lighting and security, so let's say to look after a utility or an aviation perimeter, you can hack it. Every aspect of what I do can be hacked. So I've got a seminal question. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but I'm someone who's vulnerable. And the way I look at it is that we have regulations which force us to use backdoors. If every bit of hardware and software is vulnerable through design and the bad guys get through them, why are we not, as an industry, asking the powers that be to have a mathematically probably secure, that means proven by maths, not to be breakable, post-quantum front door?
Is that possible? I mean, it's a very good question. Yes, thank you. I know some areas, I mean, exactly the points you raised there are of concern. What we're seeing some customers looking to do is to automate elements to reduce the threat coming in from malicious hackers coming through. The way you've described it, I can see that going some of the way, processes, robotic process automation, but I don't think from the way you've described it that will cover all the eventualities. So I think it still remains to be a matter of consideration.
The reason I'm here is because through LinkedIn, a Swiss national brought me some crypto, and that crypto has been looked at by the auditors of the kind of places you'd expect the final auditor to look at, and they see that as the first peanut rolling forward in 30 years. And the code is so small it can be put on an RFID that every time you get close, somebody says, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And that says that there is not an appetite. So in this morning, Mr. Parler said, please don't use a castle with a gate. Front door is a castle with a gate. And the dark trace, people said, use artificial intelligence. So we have two schools of thought here. And I believe that the time is right now for GCHQ, CIA, NSA to actually sit around a table and fix this. Because if the bad guys get a front door, we're all up, what's it, creek?
I think one of the problems is that the problem itself is almost impossible to answer. Hackers are really, really good at what they do. They're not. They're. Yeah. I'm not just saying that so I get a shout out from them, although it looked like from one of their tweets we do agree on monopolies. The problem is that they're really good at what they do, and as good as all the various vendors that we have who are focused solely on cybersecurity, it's still an ever-changing problem, and it's always evolving. Earlier I put up a list of technologies that probably everyone's implemented. It's huge, and it's still not enough. So I think that's the problem in kind of trying to assign a government group or a range of groups, even if they brought in a ton of vendors, to actually have a single solution or a guaranteed solution. I don't think it's possible. I think the safest position that you can have in cybersecurity is to assume that you will get hacked. You have to assume it, because as soon as you assume that you're safe, as soon as you go, tick box, I am safe, you are screwed. So, you know.
And that goes into some of the smart cities design and some of the designs around smart cars is that they need controls. That is the human intervention part, which is like, I can choose to step on the brake if I want to step on the brake. You know, and they still, maybe it has to be a hybrid system for a while. I don't think that, you know, from a psychological perspective, most people aren't ready for this stuff yet. But if everything can be hacked, then it's a design problem more than anything else.
So today nobody mentioned post-quantum.
Oh, God.
And if you unleash a post-quantum computer, every crypto in every central bank will eventually crumble.
I think that's a question for the pub. Like seriously, that's a question for the pub because I don't know if there's, you know, I don't think, you know, when my head explodes that there's any, we would have come up with that answer if we've had that answer.
I think there's also another point here. I mean, because what you seem to be looking for is kind of international cooperation at sort of agency and government level to sort of solve this. This is slightly above my pay grade because the geopolitics stuff gets a bit beyond me. But it strikes me we are facing a slight issue around how you feel about governments and corporations. We in the West have for a long time regarded government and corporations as very separate and needing to be separate and never the twain shall meet. So government regulates corporates, corporates do their thing. You're looking in terms of cybersecurity at adversaries which have traditionally not had that government-corporate split, namely Russia and China, for a long period of time and still feel that a government's aim is a corporate's aim, and the two are enmeshed very well together. So when you're doing those kind of big geopolitical deals between the different agencies, you're slightly getting two different views of the world, would be what I'd say. So I think that's a dimension to feed in. Not that helps solve the problem, but there you go.
I think the big challenge we face, both in government, defence and industry, balance of costs. It doesn't cost very much to attack, but it costs a lot to defend. And the utopian dream would be to reverse that balance and that we have very, very, very secure systems that are very hard to get in, but conversely, they'd be very hard to get out. And it's finding that right balance of defence, doing proper assessments of the threat to your organisation, valuing your assets and knowing where to put emphasis on protection.
I think as well, if I take it you're specialising in industrial control systems, right? From what you said at the start. Okay. So there's definitely things that you can do to secure them. I mean, I'm not an expert in that area, but I don't know, funding in training and in, you know, if your company can fund actually pen testing those products, and you know, if there's nothing that's found out already, find stuff out yourselves. Like, be at the forefront of the industry, in your industry, and of those technologies. If there's nothing readily available, that's a not great opportunity in a way for you to find those vulnerabilities yourselves.
Okay, so I'm a marketing guy, and if you looked at that slide this morning, on the left were American tech giants, and on the right there were Far Eastern tech giants. There was nothing in the middle. The Internet of Things is the only thing the American tech giants don't own. It's an opportunity for European business. If you put a bit of crypto that can fit on an RFID, a long trip since the red eye this morning from Edinburgh, all the way through to looking after the security perimeter of a large utility or organization or the national grid, you've got the Holy Grail, because you can then secure the IoT. At this point in time, the Internet of Things is not secure. And I cannot go and put Granny from the Castle of Gowrie in a self-driving bus to go from somewhere in the rural area to Perth.
These technologies have been built. They're being refined. They can't be released yet. Certain ones can't be released yet because it can put people's lives in danger. Like, we all know that. We're all on the same page with that. Now, you know, there's Wi-Fi kettles that can be hacked. There's dolls that can be hacked to say swear words. If that's something that you're passionate about changing, if that's something that your company is passionate about changing, be at the forefront of that change. Don't be as reliant on the government to come up with those ideas.
You sound practically American.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't.
Are you sure you're European? That doesn't make any sense.
No, I don't.
All right. Well, let me make an offer.
We're in a big danger if we start integrating government with our businesses and with religion, and we get onto all these different sort of things. How much power do we want them to have, right? If you're in a company that makes its money from IoT devices, then put money into securing those IoT devices.
I think it's worth saying as well, just very quickly, that whenever we talk about autonomous vehicles and then we talk about IoT, we classify them as a similar thing, but hacking a car and hacking a kettle are very, very different.
Yeah.
And a lot of the autonomous vehicle stuff is happening as part of the 5G push, which is a global, actually surprisingly unified push. Yeah, in comparison to other things of its nature, where they're developing things like V2X networks and keeping it separate from an IoT device that runs on your BT router, which is, that's always going to be a little bit more difficult to secure. But things that are infrastructure critical or something that is like a vehicle, which could quite easily kill someone if the wrong person managed to hack it, those are on a different line. We still call it IoT, but we really shouldn't.
I don't know. This is England, and you take your kettles very seriously. It's true.
Yeah, we got some good kettles.
Yeah,
We like
okay.
tea, don't we?
I think there was another question back there.
Hello. This is a question for Anonymous, so I'm not sure whether there's some speech-to-text service going on.
They're
but
always listening.
They're always listening. They're everywhere. Anonymous, what steps do you take to ensure that your activities don't affect or impact innocent bystanders?
Good question.
Are they gonna
And
try?
now we wait 15 minutes.
No.
That's tight.
I was going to say we could do a magic 8-ball. Roll again. Roll again. Should I buy the Maserati?
Have you typed that in as a tweet? Could you do that? And you should get a
Should we move on? while we
immediate
wait and
answer
then
on
come
the
back?
on the
Should
screen.
we move on and come back?
Yeah. So while
I
that's
don't know.
going on in the background, any other questions?
Are there any other questions while we wait for a response?
One at the back.
Sorry, I'm going to bring this back to GDPR. Just a general question. GDPR talks about ensuring that you have done enough, or words to that effect. What is the panel's theory or thoughts on what is enough? Because obviously, if there weren't any users, our services would be ultimately secure, which isn't very practical for retail.
I think a lot of it will probably be on a case-by-case basis, as we need to have some examples that come through that are worth a GDPR fine of some amount, and that will then start to set the precedent, is what I see. I mean, I think there's probably going to be a lot of it where if you have certain tools that you can say, look, I bought this specifically, I implemented this specifically to try and protect that data. But I think, so I think there will be a conversational piece if there is the decision made that there should be some kind of fine. And I am trying really hard not to plug my product right now, but there's stuff out there. But I think, it will be something where there needs to be a precedent set. That will probably come from a lot of the big fines, but I imagine that they'll cherry pick some smaller ones to help set precedent as we go along before we could possibly have anything close to a tick box exercise, because it's definitely not a tick box exercise. I think we wasted 2 years trying to think that it was.
Okay, so let me put it into practical terms then. One of the items that we notice is that if we try and implement extra security on customer login, our customers walk away to other sites. So we've almost got GDPR saying, put more security on, but then our regulators actually not mandating that in any way. Yet, if that was an industry-wide change that forced, for example, 2FA, then every competitor in our organisation would have the same position, and all straight away we'd be in a more stronger position. Why are they not aligned in that way, do you think?
I think that the short answer is the ICO, much as I love the ICO, are past masters in leading from the back. I don't know whether anybody else has found this. A lot of people I speak to have this issue. What they want is the ICO to tell them, do this, do that. You want to go to the ICO and say, I'm doing this. Is it right? And the ICO goes, yes. And you go, stamp, ICO approved. That's not, they just don't work like that. It's like walking through a minefield with somebody behind you tutting. I wouldn't put your foot there. Well, it really is. But the answer, dissatisfying I think is the answer you've sort of given yourself, which is look around what your competitors are doing. and do the same. And it must be really frustrating when all your competitors are doing stuff that's not as secure as you want to be. But that's kind of where the state of the art is at. And the other thing from what I know of the ICO is that it's not so much how much have you spent on kit, how much kit, it's have you thought about the different things? It's as much proving to them that, yeah, we thought of that, and we thought of this, and we know this data is really valuable, and we did something about it. But the worry is you could think you've done enough, and next thing you know, you're on the hook of a fine. So.
But I also think from an end user perspective, right, and from looking at your competition perspective, this is where the human element comes in, because I think that designing for ease of end user security is something that is just beginning to awaken here, right? Is everyone paying attention to Anonymous now? I totally got upstaged. It's okay, you can read it.
Okay, we're coming to the end of our Q&A session. One more question at the back.
Excuse me, yes. So this is for a question for individuals. So let's say you have like, your data have been breached, like as an individual, okay? Like my passport or like my personal details have been leaked in a breach because a company has been breached. So at the moment we have the regulation saying like, they get a fine, they get hit, they get reputational damage, whatever. But actually, what do we do for the individuals? So what do we do? How do we compensate? Because actually it's like left to their shoulders. So it's up to you now, fix it, get a new passport, get the police told that you've been breached and all your data is there around. So you can't move house, actually, no? Is there something that it can be done for individuals to compensate or recover from a data breach by third party?
I have a really funny story, actually. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, I had a really funny story. I know a company that what they used to do is if any customer data was, I didn't work there, a friend worked there. If any customer data was released anywhere, like everyone's like, okay. What they would do is pay for those customers to have an Equifax account for 12 months, and then Equifax got breached. It was so funny. Like, oh well. So, yeah.
It leads, and I like.
Sorry, I didn't answer your question.
Because I think it leads to a digital rights conversation, right? Which is sort of like, what do I own that's mine? And I extrapolate this out also to voice technology and everyone putting Dot and Alexa and everything else into their home. Do I own what I say? Do I own every utterance that is mine? Are there rights to that? I don't know. I mean, I certainly know that we can look at intellectual property, we can patent certain things, but if I'm the first one to say that's fierce, like, what are my digital ownership of that? What's my data worth? I don't know what my identity, so I think these things are in flux. I don't know if you know anything about what the government is discussing or how this is starting to evolve. Sorry, did I put you on the spot? Didn't mean to.
I suppose if you can get a refund for like a really bad product.
Okay, I'll give a good example.
Yeah.
I was a victim of the British Airways hack. I'd actually changed a flight booking during the period notified that they were compromised. And I went into a lengthy exchange with British Airways saying, hey, I've not lost money, but my data has gone. And I don't know what value I can put on my data, but may I suggest that £5,000 compensation would be appropriate? And this went on for weeks, backwards and forwards. No, we don't compensate. No, you haven't lost any money, blah, 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 blah. And I went back eventually. I said, well, what if I do lose money as a result of this thing? Then we will compensate you. So I think under GDPR, there are clauses in there, and I haven't read the fine detail, but there are clauses in there that the customer should be compensated in some way if there is proof of financial loss or financial expenditure covering yourself.
Two things I think are interesting about this. Number one, the duty of care that's being talked about on social media companies. If I was a social media company, I'd be lobbying the fuck to stop that happening. Because, okay, what you've now got is a bunch of ambulance-chasing lawyers emailing people, like John is saying, you know, did you see something online? Did you find it harmful? Contact us, lawyers for you. And you put in class action suits. And I wonder whether in security terms that's going to translate across. Was your email address stolen? Were you injured? The thing that's not that means that this hasn't really come to fruition, I think, is if you're a hacker, you're after generally two things: credit card numbers and email address, personal data type stuff. The credit card numbers, you use them, the user finds out, they replace the credit card, they're compensated. That's how that works. The email addresses get put into spam machines and used to send out spam bots. And it's serious, but it's serious in such a devolved and mass way. Like, you've got millions of email addresses. So we all get lost in the noise. So I think the reason why users aren't jumping up and down and saying, where's my compensation and so on, is on credit cards, they're getting their money back in a new card. And on email addresses, they can't see the harm. They can't see the damage to themselves.
But I think now that we're starting to see more healthcare institutions, especially in the United States, being hacked and whatnot, that's persistent data. And a social security number or my medical records, you know, are a little bit harder to replace than a credit card number. And I wonder if that is going to be some sort of building of awareness or building of emotional response to some of this, which is the cookies are annoying. Check, 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 GDPR, annoying, 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 right? And it's inconvenient, or it could be slightly financially inconvenient unless you're at that, you know, that large end of the bell curve, which is your mortgage gets stolen or it's thoroughly cyber crime, cyber fraud. But again, that's still a relative minority. But something like, you know, everyone's medical records and getting breached in the NHS might make people have an emotional response to maybe we should secure this stuff a little bit better. So I just, you know, I wonder if it's just because it hasn't hit something that is more emotionally valuable to people than just credit card details and an email address that I can change. I probably didn't like in the first place.
Okay, thank you for that. I just make one last observation. It always surprises me in conferences like this that passwords and password generation comes up as the biggest vulnerability. And this is a message I've been hearing for 30 years. When I started in GCHQ in the CSG part of the element, I launched a scheme called the Check Penetration Test Scheme. And we also had a team in CSG that went out to government departments. And I remember going out one day, and within the first 30 minutes, they'd found 60% of the passwords in use in that department. They were on post-it notes, they were under the keyboard, they were on letters, they were scratched on the, all over the place. I hope that government is a lot better now because of good education and penalties.
Don't bank on it. Yeah. Shoulder surfing.
So we have free puppets rapping and singing about that exact topic. So if you want some free puppet videos, call me, because I find puppets are better than GCHQ coming in telling about your password. Just try puppets. Ouch. No, I'm just saying try puppets. What do people like? Do they like the government or do they like Muppet Show? It's just, sorry, it's not you. You're very good.
But we have to do better, collectively. Right. We're going to take a break now. Thank you, panel, for answering and fielding the questions. Can we be back here at 3 minutes to 4?